So that experience was when I realized how much I had been following Seamus's lead. The fact that I stumbled so badly over something that should have been relatively simple in the scheme of cancer treatments, getting a wig, I just absolutely stumbled, and I started realizing how much I had been following along, and that what I was doing was based on the experience I had been through with Seamus. And then there came a night where it really hit home just how much I had learned from this dog. And that was a night in the middle of cancer treatments, in the middle of my chemotherapy. I had just about every reaction you can have to chemo, except nausea. But one that I did not expect was, it turned out I was allergic to one of the chemotherapies that they gave me. That's right, my body is allergic to poison, which should be a good thing. But I broke out in a rash, basically from head to toe. So in the middle of this one night, I couldn't sleep, absolutely couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning every which way. I had been scratching at myself. I was bloated from the steroids they give you to prevent the nausea. I was bald. I mean, forget bald. I was utterly hairless, not even eyebrows or nose hairs, which are more important than you think. And bloated and covered in this rash, and I had bone pain from the shot that they give you to prevent a white blood cell crash. And I had insomnia, I had night sweats, I had a headache, you name it, I had it. I absolutely could not sleep. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I got up and went into the bathroom. I went to the guest bathroom down the hall so I didn't wake up Chris, who at this point in the story is about 6 years younger than me, right? So I went to take a lukewarm oatmeal bath, because you also can't be in really hot water when you're in chemotherapy. So you can't even have that relaxation. So I went to take this oatmeal bath. And it was a little bit soothing, a little bit. But then I got out of the bathtub. And when I got out of the bathtub, naked of course, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. So I saw my bald, bloated, now inflamed red and bleeding where I was scratching myself. And I looked even worse than I felt. And it was just this monster in the mirror. And I had this moment of, how do you recover from this? How am I ever going to go back to normal? Will there ever be a normal again? I don't think the body can recover from this. How is this ever going to happen? And just as I was about to drop down to the bathroom floor and curl up in the fetal position and let out the ugly cry seen on Lifetime television for women most commonly, just as I was about to do that, I heard right outside the bathroom door, obviously my dog, right outside the door. And I threw on my robe instead of dropping down and giving up on the world. I threw on my robe and opened the door because I did not want Seamus to wake up Chris. Because despite the fact that he had been with me, as you can tell from the story, every step of the way in Seamus's cancer journey and my cancer journey, I somehow had convinced myself that he hadn't noticed what I look like. So I didn't want him to see me like that. So I flung on my robe, flung open the door, and stepped out to quiet Seamus, and he ran away from me. He ran down the hall away from me. And I started to follow him. He ran back towards me, still howling, ran back that way. Down. So he was doing that down the hall. So we know what's going on, right? Timmy fell down the well. I need to go follow him. So obviously he wanted me to follow him. So, okay, I need to stop this dog. I will follow him. So I followed him down the hallway, down the stairs, and he went into the kitchen because he's a beagle. I followed him into the kitchen. And Chris was in the kitchen where he had been baking cookies in the middle of the night. He had found a movie for us to watch and got up and baked cookies for us and was prepared to stay up with me all night. And at that moment, I realized a few things, as you might imagine. One of them was I had remembered that when Seamus was going to his treatment, when he was going to the oncologist, now all of us have pets, right? So you know when you take them, and dogs in particular, when you take them, they have this sixth sense about knowing that they're going to the vet, right? And they start the four-paw breaking system right away, and they don't want to go in, and they don't. That never happened when I took Seamus to the oncologist. Never happened. He happily, wagging his tail, howling his merry little clown self into the oncologist's office every single time. And I realized it was because every time they did a procedure, whether they took his temperature, took blood, took him back to give him chemo, whatever it was, they gave him a cookie. Every single time. So for Seamus, this was not the mean cancer place. This was the cookie place. This was a place that gave him cookies. And that was his focus, and that's what he thought of when he went in. So in that night, with Chris sitting there with a nice tray of warm, freshly baked cookies for me, I had to remember, really, it was time to follow the dog's lead. It was time to focus on the cookies. Cancer has a way, as many tragedies and adversities do, it has a way of focusing us on the things that are taken away from us, the things we lose. We lose control, we lose our health, we lose a lot of our social life, and at times, like that evening, we lose our sanity. And it was time for me to focus on what I had. It was time to focus on those cookies. I had a man who had stayed by me through this whole thing and got up and baked cookies. I had a dog who kept me going, who had showed me the way through. And I was making it through, and it was time to change my focus. So on that very night, the worst night, the lowest point of it, was also the highest point of it, because I really had that realization. And we put it to use. And I asked Chris if he had remembered the cookies, and that's why he baked the cookies, and he did. And he remembered it even a little bit more and earlier than I had, because what he had also been doing for me as we went to various stages of treatments, he is an excellent cook, and he also owns a wine shop. And he's my now 4 years younger than me boyfriend. These things are not unrelated, that this relationship had lasted, and he owned a wine shop. He had been, when we went to chemo or we went to different appointments, he always packed these really wonderful picnic lunches. And I love wine, he loves wine. Wine tastes terrible when you're in chemotherapy. Believe me, I tried. It tastes terrible because you have this dirt metal feeling in your mouth. Tequila, on the other hand, cuts right through it. I'll just offer that out there for you. But what Chris did was he got great Gatorade and little plastic wine glasses and brought those to chemotherapy and meals. And he had been doing this all along to get my focus away from what was happening to me. And that night I really realized it and appreciated it, and we continued to do that. And so the cookies in life are not always actual cookies. Sometimes it's just a treat. It's something else to look forward to. You know you have to get through this, but maybe if you think about this, or there's a reward at the end of it. I think of it now because I'm still practicing law for full-time, and I'm lucky enough to have one book out that became a New York Times bestseller, and I have a second book coming out. So at times I'm crazy busy, and I have to stop and remind myself that I have absolutely nothing to complain about, and crazy busy is a good thing in this scenario, because you remember that alphabet life that I told you about at the beginning? That is exactly what I have now. My life is filled with alcohol sounds bad. Wine, books, coffee, and my dogs. And when we do our book tours, Chris comes with me and we do a wine tasting. So that is the cookie. I can't possibly look at, well, I can because I'm sort of a natural pessimist, but if I looked at how busy I was and crazy it was or tired I was, how ungrateful is that? I have to look at, hey, I finally got, in a weird way that never could have been planned out, I actually got my alphabet life. And in the last couple of years, I have really had to find that focus on a cookie over something that's just extremely important to me, which is the basis of the second book as well. Seamus ended up diagnosed with cancer a second time, 9 years after the first one, but he got diagnosed a second time. And as you might understand, I was extremely angry about that as well, because our little household of 2 humans and 1 dog had, in the space of 8 years, 3 cancer diagnoses. That's too much. So I went on this tear to find out everything I could to fight cancer, every possible healthy thing I could do. And I hate diet and exercise, but those were high on the list of what you can do. So I had to look at that. I looked at changing his diet. I looked at changing my diet. I walked him more. I started doing yoga, which turned out I loved it. But I started doing all those things, and I turned to a plant-based diet. And when I turned to a plant-based diet, because that is the healthiest cancer-fighting diet, I started looking into food and where our food comes from and the food system. And I learned about how horrible factory farming is and what we do to animals. And as someone who considers herself a lifetime animal lover, I was shocked and appalled at my own behavior. And I learned about animal testing. So many of our products are tested on animals, cosmetics, household supplies, and they're tested on beagles. 96% of these 70,000 dogs in laboratories being tested on are beagles. my dog, my love. So I went through this horrible experience where I called it restless brain syndrome. My brain was like actually shaking in my head. Not like I couldn't concentrate or couldn't sleep. It was like almost a physical vibration in my head. Well, when you're a cancer patient, you say that to your oncologist, because I still have to go for annual checkups. You say that to your oncologist, you get sent for a brain MRI. So I had to go for a brain MRI. And at some point, I finally realized, I was watching all these documentaries. I was reading all this stuff. I was making myself crazy. I was giving myself restless brain syndrome. And I had to realize that, and I had to kind of back away from it, and I had to find the cookie. I had to focus on the cookie. And in this case, what the cookie turned out to be was I started visiting farm sanctuaries. I went to the Gentle Barn in Los Angeles and the farm sanctuary just outside of it, and I got as involved as I could with Beagle Freedom Project, who rescues dogs that have been tested on in laboratories, and I adopted one of their beagles. And I adopted a second beagle as well. Those are these two cuties on this one. This dog spent the first 18 months of his life being tested on in a pharmaceutical laboratory in Northern California. This dog was found roaming on the streets with a big old tumor sticking out of her chest that turned out to be cancerous as well. And when we had the surgery to get her spayed and get that tumor removed, we also learned she'd been shot. She has buckshot throughout her body. All of those things were making me crazy, what we do to animals and all this that had happened. And so I threw myself into focusing on the cookies, which is these two adorable dogs and the life that I could give them. And things like the Gentle Barn and the farm sanctuary and the great work that was being done. So no big surprise with that lead in, I did turn vegan also. And I eat vegan cookies now. So what I want to say to you is, you can follow our dog's leads too, right? And you need to find the cookies in life, in business, and focus on that. Sometimes it's just a quick adjustment. Sometimes it's grabbing a cookie. Sometimes it's just a whole new outlook, and you have to find some other way to come at it. But I'm sure what Seamus would like you to know is that life's cookie jar is never empty. You just need to reach in there, grab around for that cookie. But I will tell you, please make sure your hand is in the right cookie jar. Thank you.